this guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us. So you've said that your office does not pre-approve vacations. That's contrary to the statements that have been made by representatives of the Prime Minister. Specifically, the government House leaders said that the vacation was pre-approved. So to be clear, do you pre-approve vacations by designated public office holders?
I just read you the provision of the law. I give advice. I give advice when asked questions about conflict. We give the answer. The office holder can describe that advice that he gives whichever way he wants to refer it. In this case, they called it pre-clearance. It's not a term I would have used. What we did is we advised him on the propriety of his trip to Jamaica. As you know, it's in the public domain that he consulted us and we advised him.
Okay. So the Prime Minister has offered 3 separate public statements on this matter as to the disclosure to your office. Are you able to share with us if it was the first, second, or third version of events that representatives of Mr. Trudeau provided Canadians? Can you say which one he consulted you on?
No, I cannot. As I pointed out, it's confidential. I'm not responsible for the spokesman of the Prime Minister and the way he characterizes our interaction. I can only tell you what happened. They consulted us, we gave advice, they went to Jamaica. If it had not been an acceptable gift, it would have had to be reported on our website. 30 days have passed and nothing has been reported.
Are you satisfied that the gift of the $84,000 vacation was one from a friend and not from an entity like a corporation or a company?
As I mentioned, we verify allegations of friendship. We do our research, and the facts as disclosed publicly by the Prime Minister and what we found ourselves are coincident with the fact that this is a true friend who has no relations with the government of Canada.
So I appreciate that, but let me be a bit more precise. So it's not a question of to me if they're friends. The question is who gave the gift. So we'll give an example. If a Prime Minister is friends with, let's say, a family member of Ted Rogers, and it's established, it's been ruled on by your office that a Prime Minister is friends with this individual. If that designated public office holder then receives free wireless services from Rogers Communications Inc. in perpetuity as a gift from the friend, but the friend is not incurring the expense, the corporation is foregoing revenue. Is that an acceptable gift from a friend? And sir, if it is not, has your office been satisfied in this case that the gift was in fact paid for by Mr. Green, and it was not just revenue that's foregone by a company that Mr. Green has an interest in? Because I don't see them the same way.
Well, first of all, I don't answer hypothetical questions. So let's forget about what you are getting at. Is really the question: does it have to be the friend himself who has given that gift, or has it to be an entity that the friend controls? Frankly, that makes no difference to me. It wouldn't have cost if it hadn't been for the friend, and the friend doesn't have control over the entity that provided this. So in the case here, whether it's Mr. Green or Mr. Green's hotel that gives it, he is the controlling mind. He gave it, so therefore that's what counts as it's the friendship that triggered it.
So foregone revenue by a corporation owned by an individual is an acceptable gift?
It's not a question of you are trying to get me into income tax issues here. What the issue is not at all that. The issue is whether whether this gift in any way puts the situation in Section 11, which I pointed out, but which I read out to you, which is i.e. that that it gives you that something that might reasonably be seen to have been given influence to the public office holder. is the fact here under the debate that somebody gave a gift to the Prime Minister who is his personal friend, likely to influence the behavior of the Prime Minister? That's really the question we're looking at. And the gift was given by Mr. Green or by the company that he controls. This is fact. We know what the gift is. It has been publicly disclosed.
Right. We know now that a gift was given. Initially, the Prime Minister said that he was staying at his own expense, that this was a personal expense that he was incurring. Then when pressed, his story changed. So this is what gave rise to concern by Canadians. Of course, not something that you control, as you said.
Well, it's also totally irrelevant. If he had paid, there would be no issue.
Well, certainly it is.
If he accepts it from a friend, it's also okay.
With due respect, sir, if the Prime Minister or his spokespeople lie to Canadians and he say that he pays for something, that's what gave rise to this issue, the public interest in this issue. And so I'm not looking for you to pronounce on the morals of someone who lies or doesn't, but what we don't know is what the Prime Minister told you. And so that's the challenge that's come, because we can't take him at his word, because he's given 3 different versions of events to Canadians, and that's frankly not acceptable.
Okay. Thank you very much, and I'd like to welcome both back. As you know, I have a line of questioning that is often very rapid, and if I interject to bring my time back, it's certainly not personal. I do have some questions that may feel personal at times. I'm going to put to you, it's not intended that way. I want to begin on the topic of sponsored travel. This was certainly an issue that I raised back in October in referencing the earlier testimony regarding Stephen Ellis, Rosemary Falk, Philip Lawrence, Shannon Stubbs, and John Williamson. Sponsored travel for me, I think is something that hopefully this committee can come to as a recommendation is something that we should consider eliminating. I'm going to state that the ambiguity on the topic of what is material and what is not material, what is accepted, what is not accepted, who's funding what is being done indirectly that can't be done directly, and I reference our ongoing conversations around foreign interference and the impacts that has on our democracy. When I hear you talk about what is lavish in terms of material, I'm from Hamilton Centre. I would put to you that $3,400 for champagne and wine is lavish. $1,000 for steak dinner is lavish, and I think it's completely unacceptable in the context of the work that we do. So what I would propose to this committee right off the bat, for those that are interested in actually changing the page on these ongoing sagas of what I think are scandals that take away from the legitimacy of our democracy, is the elimination of sponsored travel and replacing it with 2 international travel credits on our MOB, free of any kind of idea of influence, foreign, corporate, or otherwise, that would allow us to do our work in international diplomacy in a clear and transparent way. And on the topic of clarity and transparency, I've heard you refer to the confidential nature of the consultations, Mr. Van Finkelstein. Do you believe that we could contemplate at this committee a process that is more transparent, perhaps one that would include a public disclosure of requests to your office for the purpose of the public good to determine on the content of people's inquiries? Or is it your opinion that confidentiality is a cornerstone of your office and is required to be able to do your work correctly?
It's the latter. I hate to say, but I really can't see how you can do it. I mean, when you come to me with a conflict of interest, you basically disclose to me your personal relationship, your financial involvement, your familial, whatever it happens to be, and you'd be surprised how complicated the life of some people are. You don't want to share that with the public. You don't want me to disclose it, etc. What we have here is we give you advice, you follow it, etc. And those things that can be disclosed or must be are disclosed, but they are disclosed in the redacted person. If you don't have that, people won't be further. And
sure.
all it means is I'm forever investigating, which is not good for the people.
I would put to you an adage of my old football coach. Yeah. Chances are, if you have to ask, you ought not be doing it. And so, as complicated as things are, the point is that we're in positions of trust to make decisions that could be complicated by externalities like influence. We're dealing with that right now in a very significant way with foreign interference. And so, in my mind, there ought to be a way to consider a disclosure that might not have the kind of degree of information that you're suggesting, but rather would give the public an understanding of the types of muddied relationships that tend to happen on the Hill. I think about the revolving door that happens between PMO's offices and lobby groups, the relationships that happen there. We've just referenced sponsored travel. You know, there's a lot of work at this committee that I don't enjoy. I don't enjoy the political mud throwing and the muckraking that happens here, and the faux outrage, quite frankly. And I say that because as much as my conservative friends want to make this an issue here and today, I would put to you an $80,000 trip is an issue for my constituents in Hamilton Centre. But I think about Stephen Harper's trip, you know, $45,000 trip to a baseball game in Broadway. These things happen. So my question through you, Mr. Chair, to the witnesses, in relation to actually substantively changing the code, what would be your recommendations to avoid us having to do this Groundhog Day of scandal, whether it's Liberals or Conservatives or what have you, to finally put an end to and provide clarity to a code that would provide an equal weight of like what is legal and what is ethical? Because I would put to you, the code as is written now provides legal opportunity and legal cover through your advice, but certainly is not ethical, at least not on the face value of it. So in your opinion, what would be some ways that we can help out of this study gain some kind of value from this beyond the media circus to actually improve the legislation?
Well, if you look at the code of which you're subject to as a member of parliament, it says to avoid real or apparent conflict of interest. That's a very well-known concept in law, which judges apply all the time when to determine the parties before them whether they are conflicted or not. Strangely enough, that wording is not used in the Act. The Act does only talks about conflict, or has this definition of what's in conflict of interest, but it does not use the word real or apparent conflicts. You could put those in the word. They have a jurisprudential meaning, and people would know how to apply them and would know how to advise you whether something. Well, yes, it's not a conflict. There's no sense, but it is an apparent conflict. It's that a rational man on the street looking at that would say, this isn't right.
And you would agree that both are damaging to our democracy?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. And again, a reminder to committee members that any review of the code is done through the Procedure and House Affairs Committee. We can make recommendations.
That's
but
my
ultimately, it's up to them to review what's in the code, as they did in 2000.
Just one item of information. Our office has produced a guideline for the application of the code, which has to be approved by the committee of the House, the procedural committee, and then you will have it in order to help you live with the code and administer and understand how we interpret it and how we try to be helpful before you even come to talk to us.
Thank you, sir. Second round, Mr. Brock, 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Mr. Berthold.
Monsieur Berthold.
Oh, Monsieur Berthold, je m'excuse.
Apologies, Monsieur Berthold, go ahead. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, for your answers. Dates are very important because there were many comments made by the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister's office that changed. On December 22nd, the Prime Minister's cabinet said that the Trudeau family will be taking on the fees for that travel. On January 4th, they changed it by saying that the Trudeau family stayed for free at an establishment belonging to a friend of the family. And on January 10th, the most recent version stated that the Prime Minister and his family stayed for free with friends of the family. Mr. Commissioner, there was a change in these statements from the Prime Minister's office. Did you work with the Prime Minister in discussions on that trip, which cost $84,000? $84,000. Neither the Prime Minister nor his office advisors in my office spoke with members of his office. We have a statement by Stephen McKinnon, the new House Leader, who stated on January 8th, 2024, that the Prime Minister followed the rules, spoke to the Ethics Commissioner to have his travel plans pre-approved. And you're saying that that discussion never occurred? Answer. You can't ask me if I spoke, or rather, members of my office spoke with members of the Prime Minister's office. I think that that statement refers to those discussions. I don't think that the statement was as clear as you're saying. The translation that I have here is pretty clear. The question is, did you speak personally to the Prime Minister of this situation? And the answer is no. When your office was informed for the first time, did you receive a request to assess the trip, Lynn? The request came in before the travel in December. Was it before December 22nd? Yes. And so it wasn't talks between your office and the Prime Minister's office that changed the public statements. As the Commissioner stated, I cannot read between the lines, but I know that the office was consulted before the trip. Mr. von Finkenstein, you have a privileged relationship with MPs and you need to respect confidentiality. What is the importance for you with speaking directly with MPs? The Prime Minister was found guilty of not respecting ethics rules twice. This trust and confidentiality is important between MPs and the Commissioner. There is a member of my team that is assigned to all of the different public office holders. If somebody wants to speak with me directly, I will accept, of course. But it's up to that person to request a talk with me if they would still like to do so after speaking with a member of my office. When we're talking about a conflict of interest, words are very important, as you know. The fact that the Prime Minister or somebody from his office stated that the trip was pre-approved might give Canadians a false sense of security. If a person says, I consulted the Commissioner and received advice, that's quite different. We're here because somebody from the Prime Minister's office stated that you had pre-approved, or your office had pre-approved the trip. And I would like for you to repeat in French that this is not what happens. Monsieur Berthold, a quick response, please. These are the words used by the spokesperson of the Prime Minister. We give advice. The office consulted us on this trip. We gave our advice. He went on this trip. And nothing was shared on our website. Nothing needs to be published on our website. This is a gift from a friend, as was declared.
I think there's some really important points being made around the nature of disclosures. You had mentioned that it takes 30 days for a disclosure to happen, and we are to, it's inferred that because there wasn't a disclosure made, everything is okay. And so through you, Mr. Chair, is it the testimony today that it's completely up to us to self-report? Is the whole code of conduct around this a process of self-reporting?
I mean, the code is the conduct, but it's the code of the act and starts with the assumption that you're an honest person. You want to avoid conflict. You know you are in a situation where you find difficulty, and because of that you come to us and say...
But directly to the question, is it required that we self-report?
Sorry, I have to answer your question. You said, does it self-correct? Obviously, if there's a problem, we expect you to self-correct it. That's
Not self-correct, self-report. There's a difference.
Self-report.
Because specifically to you, sir, you know, when you say that, like, if there's not a 30 days, you say, well, then there isn't a problem. And my question to you is, how do you know? Like, I'm not saying this as an indictment on you.
No.
I'm stating that we have a scenario where, in your time, you know, there have been plenty of complaints that have happened, very few kind of deep investigations that have resulted in any substantive findings. That's not an indictment on you. I'm saying that's an indictment on the code and the process and the systems in place and how we hold each other accountable. Because what I'm taking from this is that if I don't report it, you would never really know, would you? Yes or no?
No. They're not quite. You came to me. You came for the problem. I said to do this. And by the way, if you accept this, you can accept it, but it's over $200. So you have to report it. You don't report it, I'll start an investigation.
But if I do report
after
it,
30 days, if you do report it, the world knows, and you elect us as a judge of whether that's a proper gift for you to accept or not.
yes, and we contemplated this last scenario where I talked about the absurdity that in the current legislation, I can't accept an $800 bottle of champagne, but somebody can send a limo to my house, pick me up, fly me across the country, and we can drink the $800 bottle of champagne together, and that's okay. That's what's absurd about what we're talking about here today. I want to put this last question to you. Is it your opinion that if we eliminated sponsored travel, your work would be a lot easier in terms of dealing with perhaps more important issues by eliminating this kind of gray area of self-reporting and ambiguity around limitations?
Very quick response, please.
Well, it's certainly an issue that has been raised in the past where the previous commissioners and even myself, my team, to administer the sponsored travel in the same way as gifts, so applying an acceptability test to make sure that the individuals offering the sponsored travel are not in placing the member of parliament in a situation, conflict of interest situation.
Thank you, Ms. Delpe. Thank you, Mr. Green. We're going to conclude this round, 5 with Mr. Brock, 5 with Ms. Damoff, and then we'll reset at the top for 6-minute rounds. Go ahead, Mr. Brock, for 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, witnesses, for your attendance today. I'm going to start by just offering a comment about the level of hypocrisy that I've heard from some of the Liberal members and the NDP members. It reminds me of the phrase that those who live in glass houses shouldn't be throwing stones. In particular, Ms. Igra Khalid accepted a sponsored travel in 2017 to the United Arab Emirates and billed, or the value was $8,518. The leader of the NDP, Jagmeet Singh, in August of 2022, he and 3 staff went to Las Vegas, paid for by United Steel Workers, a total of $7,919. In November of 22, Mr. Singh again and 2 staff to Germany of just under $28,000. One can only imagine the drink and the food that was consumed at those locations. So I'll just throw that out for commentary. Now, going back to you, sir, you indicated that generally there's no value in terms of gifts from a friend that would cause you to be concerned, save and except if the trip was truly lavish, your words, or extraordinarily or different or truly unusual, that an investigation could launch. So I want to talk about the estate that Justin Trudeau and his family stayed at. It's called the Frankfort Suite. And this location has units ranging from $700 to $7,000 a night, U.S. And far be it for the Prime Minister to actually care about the taxpayer and stay at a unit at $700 a night. He had to go to the maximum at $7,000 a night. Originally a fortified residence dating back to the 17th century, Frankfort is perhaps the most desirable North Coast villa in Jamaica. The property offers 6 ensuite bedrooms. 3 bedrooms are located in the main building and 3 in the beachside villa known as the schoolhouse. The main house and schoolhouse overlook a spectacular 300-foot powdery white sand beach, widely hailed as the best stretch of private beach in Jamaica. The modern, luxurious swimming pool overlooks Chair,
Can we
have some decorum, please, from Ms. Khalid?
Can we,
Laughing.
look,
Okay?
look.
Everybody in this committee.
Well, show some
Mr.
respect.
Brock,
Come
Mr.
on,
Brock, I'm
Chair-
stopping your
Chair,
time.
and-
Mr. Brock has the floor.
Chair, just,
I would ask
just a
everyone.
point of clarification. My
I would
name
a-
is pronounced Ikra, not
Okay.
Igra. So just for Mr. Brock's reference.
Okay, so Mr. Brock has the floor. I would ask that everybody be quiet and show some respect for Mr. Brock, as I expect the same to happen for everybody that's got the floor. Mr. Brock, I've stopped your time. I actually stopped it late.
Thank you.
So I'm going to give you a little bit of runway here, and then I'll
Thank
start
you.
your
I'm
time
going
again.
to back up in light of how I was rudely interrupted by colleagues. The main house and schoolhouse overlook a spectacular 300-foot powdery white sand beach, widely hailed as the best stretch of private beach in Jamaica. The modern, luxurious swimming pool overlooks the ocean and an 8-person hot tub. A large gazebo sits adjacent to the swimming pool, which comfortably seats 12 for outdoor dining. This 5,082 square foot villa is within its own private compound comprised of 2 buildings. Now let's talk about amenities. Well, it sleeps 12 people. There is an 8-person jacuzzi, beachfront, as I mentioned. Fully staffed, sir. Butlers, a cook, a gardener, housekeepers, laundress, golf on site, spa on site. But that doesn't include, sir, the food and the entertainment and the recreational activities that probably came at an additional cost, because certainly this is probably not an all-inclusive vacation. A location like that probably has an additional amount that one would have to pay. We don't know what that amount is. You sure, sir, probably don't know what that amount is. But you don't think in all of those circumstances, sir, that raises to the level of something that is extremely lavish, extraordinary, and unusual? Because I can tell you, notwithstanding what the Prime Minister had to say to Marika Walsh from the Globe and Mail, and doubled and tripled down in the House and to other reporters, this wasn't a vacation that was shared by other ordinary Canadians over the Christmas break. Canadians have been suffering with affordability issues caused by the suffering of this particular Liberal government after 8 years of mismanagement and waste. So in those circumstances, Canadians view this as absolutely, truly extravagant and luxurious. So in those circumstances, sir, does not the public opinion weigh into your particular analysis? Because I get the impression
Mr. Brock?
that the issue...
We're past the time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You spoke about your view that if a public office holder received a gift that was truly lavish, the example you gave was a Ferrari, that would be exceptional and that you would initiate an investigation.
Well, not quite. The way it was supposed to be is if there is a legal gift, it's a gift, it's from a friend.
Sure.
And therefore, it's by definition, we have established truly it is friendship. But it's so exceptional in value that is it enough for me to invoke my powers and say, I have reason to believe that this cannot be true. And therefore, I could start an investigation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with that, this is the second year that this gift has been given to our understanding. The value bordering on $200,000 which were now in the ballpark where you could buy a Ferrari. And that was the example that was given. And it's the context for Canadians on what is exceptional and what is reasonable. $84,000 in accommodations alone. We're not challenging the question of the cost of flights and security. This is strictly $84,000 in accommodations in the form a gift in the form of this, and it's the second year in a row. Does an $84,000 vacation in a single year, if that doesn't rise to the level of exceptional, do two $84,000 gifts, even from a friend, rise to the level of exception in the Canadian context?
I'm sorry, you have to, it's not the Canadian, because the concept here is two friends. The Greens and the Trudeaus are friends. They've been friends since Mr. Trudeau was a child. He has visited this place. Mr. Green has visited Canada. He's been at 24 Sussex. He's been at Harrington Lake. He is the godfather of one of his brothers. I mean, there is a true lengthy friendship here. These are people who have means.
With due respect,
and
sir,
I'm sorry, you asked me a question, let me finish it.
Well, sir, to the point of my question was you said that if, notwithstanding the friendship, if the gift was exceptional, so you have two friends, one friend gives the public office holder a Ferrari, you said that would be enough to initiate an investigation. So we have two gifts that exceed $80,000. The median Canadian household income, $70,000. So the Canadian context is absolutely relevant. Could it be seen to influence a friend? Mr. Green is a corporate millionaire. So of course they have interests in government policy and what actions the government is going to take. Any one of the facts in isolation are just those. But we need to look at the whole picture here. And these are consecutive years with gifts worth tens of thousands of dollars. And in fact, tens of thousands of dollars more than the average Canadian household earns in a year. That's exceptional.
Well, let's start off with your basic error. You're putting those 2 years together. We advise each year on its own on the specific gifts. Okay, so that's not you can't add them up. So let's talk about the gift of this year. That's what we're talking about. The gift was here. I don't know what the value of it. When I said a Ferrari, I said $1 million too, which you forgot. I specifically said I used that figure because it was, I said, so outlandish, etc. Whether what we have here is clearly a generous gift, but it's between people who are friends, and I don't see why. Just because they're well off, they can't exchange gifts. And that's what they're doing here. You know, the Greens have come to Canada, they've stayed at Harrington Lake, etc. They've traveled around the world, apparently. And these are all public statements by the Prime Minister, not by me. Right. So you know them. And you may think it's improper or not. That's obviously the elector may think. Is it enough for me to have reason to believe that there's something here that needs to be investigated? No, it's not.
Right. I would point out that it's not public knowledge if there's been an exchange of gift of this value, but certainly the acceptance of a gift of that value. There's been no claim by the Prime Minister that he offered gifts of values of similar nature, and the hospitality that you mention is all, of course, at the Canadian taxpayers' expense. We talked about last year's gift. Is this one that, in the context of this year's gift, that you reviewed in making your decision?
Well, I wasn't here last year, so I definitely didn't make last year's decision. This year's decision was made by somebody in my office on the basis of the facts disclosed by the Prime Minister. We came to the conclusion, obviously, that this is something that we give advice. Whatever the advice was, I can't tell you, but it's a consequence of the advice was that nothing was published on our website, for which you can infer whatever you want to infer.
The last question that I have for you is do you deem it relevant that the foundation named for Mr. Trudeau's father received a sizable donation from the Greens in the context of the gift that Mr. Green also gave to Mr. Trudeau. Do you see those two as related? The gift to the Trudeau Foundation from Mr. Green and the gift to Mr. Trudeau from Mr. Green?
Very quick response, sir.
I don't see what one has to do with the other. We are talking about gifts received by Mr. Trudeau. Things received by the Trudeau Foundation is not a gift to Mr. Trudeau.
Thank you, sir.
$180,000 to
you.
his Family
Mr. Barrett,
Legacy
thank you.
Foundation is related.
Under Section 44.3, the Conflict of Interest Act, the Commissioner is required to examine a matter raised by a request from a parliamentarian who has reasonable grounds to believe the public office holder or former public office holder has contravened the Act, unless the Commissioner determines that the request is either frivolous, vexatious, or is made in bad faith. I take from your testimony, I'm going to use your inference, that you view this matter to be closed. And so, with that being said, do you consider the request for the investigation into this to be either frivolous, vexatious, or in bad faith? I'm just quoting the code.
No, obviously, I do not impose bad faith on anybody, etc.
Okay. So, with that being said, I think what we've discovered here is that many people, whether it's Trudeau and his trip to the Bahamas under the Aga Khan, and I have to say this to you, Mr. Chair, I do apologize, and I do apologize to my colleague, MP Khalid, because I did make a comment that I think elicited her response earlier, because when it was described, and the context it was described in, I couldn't determine whether they were describing storing away or worse, a plantation, which is more likely given when it was built. And I certainly hope the Prime Minister isn't spending his time in Jamaica at a former plantation. But I digress. I think what's determined is that, when people get into these positions of power, they lose touch with the everyday Canadian. And what I'm hearing from the testimony is that it's incumbent on us as MPs to create a higher standard with clearer definitions, recognizing that terms like friends are not clearly defined. There's too much ambiguity. And so with that, and to ensure that we don't run out of time, Mr. Chair, I'm going to ask for unanimous consent, and if not, the members can take this to a vote and move the motion that the committee send a letter to the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs and the Board of Internal Economy with the following recommendation: that the travel point system be used by members of Parliament to amend to allow 2 special travel points be used for international travel for parliamentary purposes, and that the Conflict of Interest Code for members of the House of Commons be amended to explicitly ban sponsored travel. If we can get one thing, hopefully from this 106 that resulted in this study, hopefully it would be that. So I'm going to seek unanimous consent, and if not, then I would invite the members to go on the record about whether they support the gravy train or they don't.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green. I'm going to ask Mr. von Fickenstein to just hold for a sec while we deal with this. Okay, so in relation to what we're dealing with today, I'm going to allow the motion to be submitted by Mr. Green as written. Mr. Green has asked whether we have unanimous consent to approve the motion that he has moved. So I'm going to seek. Oh, okay. I'm going to just let me seek unanimous consent first of all. Okay. Do we have unanimous consent?
Unanimous consent
to adopt the motion. Okay. So not seeing consent.
Add a little bit to it, that's all.
Okay. So we're going to, so it's open for debate at this point. So I'm going to open the floor for debate on Mr. Green's motion. Again, sir, I'm going to ask that you stay. Perhaps we dispose of this quickly. If not, then I am going to dismiss you. But if you just hold on, that would be great for a sec. So do we have consensus on this? I'm seeing Mr. Barrett nod, Mr. Villemure, Mr. Green, and Madame Fortier. So we do have consensus, so the motion does pass. The response, just remind me of what the question was again.
With my time, I referenced under Section 44.3 under the Conflict of Interest Act, that the Commissioner is required to examine the matter raised by a request from a parliamentarian who has reasonable grounds to believe that the public office holder and former public office holder has contravened the Act. I reference the letter exchange that happened between our friend here from the Conservative and the Commissioner, and I put to him, based on the Act, that they must do this unless the Commissioner determines that the request is frivolous, vexatious, or made in bad faith. And my question is, which one did he pick?
And my answer is that you are looking at the wrong section of the Act. There is no inquiry that from Mr. Barrett. Mr. Barrett sent me a letter and asked me a couple of questions.
Okay.
I answered the question. The portion that you invoke 44 sub 3, talking about frivolous, bad faith, etc., only applies if there has been a formal inquiry from a member of parliament and I have answered it in negative. So it's a situation that's not before us.
Okay, so
Mr. Green, you have 2 minutes left, just to update you, okay?
no, that's perfect, and that's important for the clarity, because I was not part of the 106 meeting, wasn't clear about the urgency of this, but yet here we are, and wanting to be clear that it was just a general inquiry that was made and not a formal inquiry.
I think Mr. Barrett has put the letter on his website, has he not? So you can still see it for you. It's in the public domain.
Okay.
The letter has been distributed to members of the committee as well.
I do have the letter here.
Mr. Chair, the Commissioner said that it's posted. People can like and share if they want more.
Appreciate that.
Okay, so Mr. Green has the floor. Please.
Back to the issue of sponsored travel. Even though that is passed, I think it's important to note, the topic that was brought up around foreign interference is an important one. There are currently on the docket, and I'm going to actually put in abeyance my partisan attacks. I won't name names, but there are multiple records of people who have taken sponsored travel by organizations and individuals who have no real track record. Some of these trips are so expensive, it leads me to wonder, as an average person from Hamilton Centre, how it is they pay for this. So my question to you, Ms. Robinson, is that when you're reviewing this, are flags ever raised when it comes to things like foreign interference, when it comes to the price tags attached to these versus people's reasonable ability to pay?
So essentially, as we mentioned before, when we receive disclosures of sponsored travel, it's the members themselves that fill out the declaration. We do review it just to make sure that all the necessary information, that the supporting documents is also provided as it's required under the code. And in those cases, if all the required information is provided, we make full disclosure of that. It's in the public domain. All the information is there. We also prepare a list of sponsored travel every year, so that way the population, Canadians, can see where it comes from, who provided it, and then make their determination.
Has sponsored travel ever been the inquiry of the RCMP or CSIS as it relates to MP travel as part of an ongoing investigation?
Very quickly.
On foreign interference? Has that ever?
Not that I'm aware of.
I will note for the record, sir, that you gave her a look which seemed to kind of guide the answer. And my question was to Ms. Robinson, is it something that you can answer or you're not aware of? Because there's a difference.
Definitely something that I'm not aware of.
Okay.
It's if you're going to get your last 2.5 minutes.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Perfect.
Sorry. The Prime Minister's office or an office might use your name to say that they made a request to the office and that they approved. And some ministers are ready to say anything to defend their Prime Minister. Earlier, we talked about things stated by Mr. McKinnon, and I went to check, and Mr. Stephen McKinnon said during a press conference, and I would like for you to tell me, and I could send you the sound clip. He said that the Prime Minister followed the rules, spoke to the Ethics Commissioner to have his travel plans pre-approved. Is this correct? That was the interpretation by the Prime Minister's spokesperson. That's what that spokesperson said. That's his interpretation of what happened. Somebody from the Prime Minister's office spoke to a member of my office, and we gave advice. And so when Mr. McKinnon says that the Prime Minister spoke to the Commissioner of Ethics, that is not true. I did not speak to him personally, no. Listening to you respond to Mr. Barrett's questions on a Ferrari. And I just want to understand. So a Ferrari as a gift for $200,000 could trigger an investigation by the Ethics Commissioner. But when Mr. Barrett talked about the travel that was about $200,000, you talked about $1 million for a Ferrari. Mr. von Finkenstein, as a member of the public, where would one know what the bar is? What triggers an investigation by the Ethics Commission? Whether it be a luxury car or a luxury vacation. Is it $200,000? Is it $1 million? Earlier when I was listening to you answer questions, I felt a little lost. I apologize for using the example of a Ferrari. What I wanted to say is that the rules are clear. If it is a gift coming from a friend, it is acceptable. What I said is that if at the office there's something that is so excessive, well then I can start an investigation if I see it's excessive. But it depends on the means of a person, because for me, $84,000, if a friend is offering me a trip of $84,000, it could be seen as excessive because I could never be able to pay that myself. We have to look at all of the circumstances, the amount of the gift, the friendship rather, the situation, and if needed, I can launch an investigation. And so you could have thought it necessary to start an investigation. And another question before my time runs out, Mr. Commissioner. When you talked with my other colleague earlier, you stated that when you're looking at a file, you will give your legal opinion, but also your opinion on how a gift might be perceived. But if you're not speaking directly with the Prime Minister or with an MP, how can this friendly advice be given? And that advice on Jamaica, how was it given to the Prime Minister's office? A quick response, please. As you know, I cannot share the exact advice. I gave a general idea. So we talk about the legality of something and also the ethical nature of a decision and what the impacts could be.
And spoken as a true ethicist, I know my friend Mr. Villemure had a very accomplished career prior to this and is certainly a value add to the committee. Look, I'm still looking at the gaps in the legislation, and I've heard time and time again that the advice, and I want to make it clear because there was a reference, I think, to client solicitor privilege, and yet you've admitted, I think, at least I've taken from your testimony, that you're simply providing advice, that you're not quasi-judicial in terms of the way in which you investigate these matters outside of formal complaints, as we've learned today. So you've said that it's the definition of whether or not a friend provides the gift, and yet referencing Section 2, subsection 3 of the Conflict of Interest Act, the term friend is not actually defined.
No.
So in your opinion, would this be a glaring oversight in legislation that leads to, again, too much ambiguity on whether or not somebody ought to be considered a friend or an interest?
You know, this is really a question of drafting. If you try to define friend, then you're automatically limited. And you make this is a friend and not, and people will try to either fall in or without the definition. We just put friend and give the discretion to the commissioner to decide it, and then, if need be, further by the courts in terms of judicial review. You will set out the concept, and you hope that in the administration of the act, etc., it becomes clarified. That's usually how we do it in Canada. The U.S. does exactly the opposite. They will define it extremely narrowly.
But there can't really be a judicial review of your work,
Yes, there have been
there?
a couple of cases on this. One of them says the assessment of friendship is a matter of fact and should be measured not only by considering the closeness of the bond between the office holder and the veneer, but also against more objective indicators.
So in just for the people who are watching, who I'm sure are glued to their televisions right now, if they had a complaint, or if this had been an official complaint put by my friend Mr. Barrett to you, and you decided it wasn't worth pursuing, then a member of the general public could take that decision and apply for judicial review. Is that how the process works?
If I made an error, yes, you can have judicial review. Decision that I made.
But how would they possibly know if it's a client solicitor privilege and you don't have to disclose anything?
That's enough. Mr., just quickly answer that question, please.
I think it's an important question.
Well, I can't answer. I said it's akin to solicitor-client privilege, because it's not, as it is, as I say, it's advice, that that's all we're doing. And the whole idea...
Okay.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Can you provide it maybe?
Yeah, perhaps
why
you
don't
can,
I give you
That'd be
an
great.
answer?
I would appreciate that, just
would be
for the
easiest.
sake of time. And I
Thank you.
can assure you, Mr. Green, the only one that's glued at this hour to after these proceedings is my mom in Barrie. But go ahead, Mr. Brock. You have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, what I described to you earlier in my first round was a super luxurious vacation by all imagination. Now, a luxurious vacation or a gift is not defined in the Act. It's fair to say that you're applying a subjective lens as to what you deem to be super luxurious, which would require an investigation, as opposed to an objective standard that the Canadian public view is clearly luxurious. Now, on the Ferrari issue...
Mr. Brock, I'm having a tough time hearing Mr. Brock, so if we can keep the conversations down, please. Sorry, Larry. I didn't
Thank
mean
you.
to-
You stop my time,
Yep,
Chair?
I did. Yep, go ahead.
You provided an example that if someone gave the Prime Minister a Ferrari, clearly you would flag that. That would be an investigation. A Ferrari anywhere in the neighborhood of $200,000, but 2 consecutive yearly vacations to this ultra opulent vacation totaling well over $200,000 does not qualify. Is that accurate, sir?
No,
Not accurate?
that's not what I said. What I said, first of all, I said 1 million, not 200,000. Secondly, I said in such a situation, I could, if I want to, step in and have an investigation. I did not say I would. I did not say it says. I didn't. I just said if.
But that would be your subjective standard as to what is luxurious, correct? Because it's not defined in the Act, sir.
No, of course it's not defined. It's a discretion. I have the discretion to start an investigation when there is a situation which I think gives me reason to believe that is something has been done here that
I got to move on.
amounts to a conflict of
I've got 1 minute left. Now, on the issue of the communications from the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister's office, I'm not asking about content. I'm asking about delivery. Was it delivered via email, text, telephone, or memo? Because I believe your earlier evidence was there was perhaps a phone call. I don't know what duration, but can you clarify that, sir? Because it is extremely important that the public understand what details were provided to you by the Prime Minister's office. Please answer that.
Honestly, I don't know the answer. Do you? And then
Will you table that answer to
my colleague can answer it to you.
It was by email.
By email. One email or more than one?
An exchange, so I...
We can provide you
Yeah.
that answer.
You were asking questions? Is that why there was an exchange?
I cannot tell the content, but there was a back and forth.
Yes, so you were asking questions? I'm not asking about the question itself, but
Probably we were asking for clarification.
how many
like
emails went back and forth?
Oh, I can't I
Thank-
don't
Was it
recall.
the Prime Minister's office or the Prime Minister
Thank you,
himself?
Mr. Brock.
Can she answer that?
Quickly, please.
Prime Minister's
As-
office or the Prime Minister?
As the Commissioner mentioned before, it was with the Prime Minister's office.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brock.